You might picture a brown bear entering the world as an unstoppable force of nature. The reality is far less intimidating. You start out blind, hairless, and squirming in the dark dirt of a subterranean den, essentially an oversized hamster and a highly edible target. When spring breaks, your mother drags you into an environment that views you as a snack. She demands immediate adaptation to a hostile forest that offers no safety net for the weak. The woods test that vulnerability almost immediately. Imagine wandering through the brush when a pack of starving wolves bursts from the shadows, their eyes locked directly on you. At this stage, you completely freeze, entirely incapable of defending yourself. But your mother reacts instantly. She hits the pack with the momentum of a landslide, shredding the attackers and forcing a bloody retreat. As the wolves run, the reality of your environment sets in. Survival here requires demonstrating a terrifying and overwhelming capacity for violence. But blind violence doesn't put food in your stomach. When you try to mimic your mother catching salmon, you usually end up face first in the river, splashing around frantically while the fish effortlessly swim right past you. This diagram shows the biological rule of caloric acquisition. Burning massive energy wildly chasing prey with an empty yield means actively starving. But mimicking your mother's calculated pounce exerts minimal drain, securing a massive spike in caloric yield. Securing a meal is a highly engineered mechanical process. You have to learn how refined technique turns raw effort into the heavy energy surplus required to actually grow. And then, without a single grunt or heartfelt goodbye, your mother simply vanishes. She walks away one afternoon, leaving you entirely alone and evaporating your protective buffer in an instant. This chart highlights a phase ecologists call the independence deficit. Notice the brutal drop-off right at the timeline marker for maternal separation. Most newly solo bears simply lack the physical mass to intimidate rival predators, and they quickly become a meal. The first few weeks of isolation are a masterclass in error. You misjudge distances, misread local threats, and stumble clumsily through the underbrush, drawing the immediate attention of hungry wolf packs who are thrilled to find you unsupervised. Adolescence in the forest is a high mortality filter, aggressively weeding out the inefficient and the weak. Let's see how that filter operates in practice. You are starving, navigating alone when you catch a lucky break. You stumble across a freshly killed, steaming deer carcass. But right as your jaw opens to take a bite, the brush snaps. A much larger, heavily scarred male bear locks eyes with you and charges in to claim the meat. This decision tree matrix maps out your violence calculus. You weigh the desperate need for satiation against the mortality risk of fighting a heavier opponent. The risk node flashes deep red. You instantly abandon the carcass, accepting temporary starvation to guarantee physical preservation. True apex survival relies heavily on strategic restraint. Staying alive requires knowing how to kill, but mastering the forest requires knowing exactly when to run away. Fast forward 4 years. That scrawny, terrified cub packs on heavy muscle, develops claws sharp enough to carve tree trunks, and expands into a 700-pound apex adult. The dynamic of the woods completely inverts. Instead of checking your blind spots, you patrol your territory with absolute impunity. Smaller predators now actively alter their travel routes just to avoid crossing your path. The carcass encounter from your youth mirrors itself, but the roles are reversed. You approach a younger, 2-year-old bear, eating a fresh kill. He takes one look at you, abandons the food, and sprints into the trees without you ever throwing a strike. You have finally earned the apex dividend. You can now harvest crucial calories strictly through the projection of intimidation, without spending a single drop of energy on combat. But a massive body is expensive to run, and time always collects its debts. Years pass. Joints stiffen, reaction times drop by fractions of a second, and fights that used to heal overnight start leaving you limping for days. You fall victim to the attrition principle. The forest operates like a biological factory, constantly generating younger, faster, and hungrier challengers who continuously test the aging king to see if his armor is cracking. During a rough territorial dispute, you catch yourself stepping backward instead of pressing forward. You are hesitating, realizing the physical cracks are finally starting to show. As the first heavy snow of winter falls, you don't fight the cold. You slowly retreat into an old, forgotten den, curling up in the dark as your breathing slows, yielding your space back to the elements. In nature, dominance is never a permanent kingship. It is a highly contested, temporary lease on life, one that ultimately defaults right back to the indifferent forest.